Okay, so in the previous video I mentioned how we're going to use GameObject.findGameObjects with tag in order to find our root object in each scene after it's loaded, and that the potential issue with this method is that the root object has to be in an activated state in order to be found by this method. So why is that a problem? Well, imagine a scene where we have terrain as our root object. Now, if I just need to load this root object at its default position, which in this case is 0, 0, 0, and I never need to move that root object, then I don't have any issues because the player will only ever see this object and its child objects at that default position. However, if I need to move this object, for instance, if I'm using an endless world, if I'm using world recentering, or if the origin of my world is different than the position of my first root object in my group, then this root object is going to have to be moved after being loaded. And if it's just always visible to the camera, then the player can potentially see it at a place. Possibly this object may even spawn on top of the player, which is obviously not a good thing. So we need some way to hide the objects before they're positioned correctly. Now previously, the system used for this was layer hiding. In this system, we set the layer of the root object and possibly child objects to a hidden layer. And the hidden layer was set on the camera to cold. So on your camera, you'd go in on your main camera, and under culling mask, you'd uncheck the hidden layer. So when that object was loaded, the player wouldn't be able to see it, and then it would be positioned correctly and then moved to the visible layer. Now the problem with this issue is when your root object is a terrain or a mesh, when this object is first loaded, even though it's invisible to the camera, it's still enabled, and so it has to have physics calculations done on it. And then once it's moved to its correct position, another set of physics calculations has to be done. And there's possibly some other calculations too that are happening. So this method of layer hiding really is not great. Excuse me. So a better method is to deactivate this object and all other objects so that when they're first loaded, there's no physics calculations going on, and we're able to move these objects, and then the calculations are only done after they're enabled at their new position. But as stated before, the root object has to be in an activated state, so in order to do this, we have to create a sort of dummy root object. Of course, this root object has to be named the same. And then we have to parent everything to that new root object, and then we can go ahead and deactivate this object. I'm going to get into more detail about the correct hierarchy for manual setup in the next video. For now, I just want you to know that with update 3.0.3, this is the new way of doing things. So layer hiding will still work. However, it's really not a good idea to use it. As I stated, the performance is going to be a lot better if you use this method of having what I call a deactivated node. Alright, so that covers this video. On the next video, I'm going to be going into manually setting up a scene for use with the scene loader components.